I call to order this regular meeting of the Show Low Planning and Zoning Commission for Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. A roll call shows that all commissioners are present this evening. We will then next have the invocation given by Commissioner Whipple, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Roberts. If you'd like to join me, please stand.
Dear Heavenly Father, as we come before Thee this evening, we are grateful for the opportunity that we have to meet. Yes, please bless us that we can have good discussions, that we can make good decisions, and we're open-minded. We ask You to please bless our government leaders and bless them that they can also make good decisions. These things we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
In the Pledge of Allegiance, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
Republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty.
The next item on the agenda is new business. Item A under new business is consideration of conditional use permit 602-04-262 submitted by Maranatha Bible Church to allow for grading without a building permit on property located at 900 South Central Avenue, Show Low, Arizona, that being APN 210-30-013. And I will turn it over to Ms. Fechtel-Cotter for the staff summary report.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Maranatha Bible Church has submitted a conditional use permit, or CUP, to allow for grading without a building permit at 900 South Central Avenue, that being APN 210-30-013. The subject property is Zone MH, which is manufactured homes. Grading on lots over 5,000 square feet prior to the issuance of building permit and churches require a CUP in the MH zone. The applicant has submitted a request to begin grading prior to obtaining a building permit. The subject property is 4.02 acres in size, and the proposed development will include a 7,000 square foot church building and an approximately 34,000 square foot parking lot with 71 spaces. The applicant has submitted a tree removal plan, which indicates that most of the trees on the subject property will remain. In addition, the applicant has indicated that an architect is currently working on construction plans for the church, and they hope to submit plans to the building department for review within the next year. The current zoning of the surrounding properties includes, to the north, R1-7, which is single-family residential, 7,000 square feet. To the south, manufactured housing. To the east, R1-15, which is single-family residential, manufactured homes excluded, 15,000 square feet. And to the west, manufactured housing. The current land uses of the surrounding properties include, to the north, Pine Haven subdivision. To the south, vacant residential. To the east, residential, and to the west, vacant residential. Transmittal memos were sent to all affected agencies. Applicable comments received include from the Timber Mesa Fire and Medical District that the future church building shall meet all applicable fire codes. The property was posted and letters were sent out to property owners with 300 feet of the subject property in accordance with city code. At the time the staff summary report was prepared, staff had not received any calls regarding the project. However, staff has received one phone call from a resident with general questions regarding the nature of the request. After reviewing the zoning ordinance, standards for review, findings of fact, discussions with the applicant, and because the request is consistent with the City of Show Low general plan, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve conditional use permit 602-04-262 submitted by Maranatha Bible Church to allow for grading without a building permit located at 900 South Central Avenue, that being APN 210-30-013, subject to the following conditions. 1. All development shall comply with applicable federal, state, and local requirements, including but not limited to Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, Arizona Pollutant Discharge Elimination Systems, and Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan permit. Hours of operation for grading shall be limited to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Dust and smoke from grading processing operations shall not adversely impact the neighboring properties. The applicant shall not negatively impact any existing easements on the subject property. A grading permit shall not be approved without a tree preservation plan showing meaningful preservation of trees on the subject property. An approved grading permit is required prior to commencement of grading activities. All grading shall comply with the city-approved drainage plan, and a conditional use permit for the church shall be obtained prior to the commencement of construction for the church. Staff, as well as the applicant, are available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Fechtelkotter. Do any members of the commission have questions for staff? Commissioner Wilson.
So if the architect is submitting plans like next year or within a year or so, what's the hurry to grade the property then?
I believe that could be answered by the applicant.
I'm good then. I'll ask.
Other questions for staff? Commissioner Roberts.
Just want to reiterate what she's asking. My concern is having that property started but not finished for a year.
I do have one question for staff. Just for clarification, this conditional use permit does not allow for the church. They'll have to do a separate one
That is
for the
correct.
church facility when they get to that point.
That is correct.
And they have some plans submitted, and so that's just to, this is what the city will review. And so that'll go through the same process where the city engineer engineering department will review these plans prior to getting the grading permit, which is separate from the building
That
permit.
is correct, yeah.
Thank you. No other questions for staff, it seems. So if the applicant would come forward, it sounds like there's a question for the applicant. If you could just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Stephen here, and I reside at 260 South First Drive, Show Low, Arizona.
Turn over to Commissioner Wilson for her question for the applicant.
My question was just if it seems like it's going to be a little while before the permit, the drawings and the permit, what's the hurry on grading it right now?
Well, we anticipate, and everything depends on money. We plan to pay for it as we go, and we've divided the project into 3 phases. Phase 1 is the grading, phase 2 is the structure, phase 3 is the tenant improvement or the build out. And we currently have an architect, and the architect will be part of the project site, which of course is not a whole lot of work. We have a floor plan, and that's and have enlisted Lusk. Lusk will build the building. Perkins is finishing up the actual estimate there, and then Tom Mosier will head up the build out for us. And so we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We anticipate, given a conditional use permit and the grading, that with the grading and the soil, the land, the engineering, and the architect, the church will have invested about $500,000 at that point. And then we'll also begin in earnest raising the money for the building itself. The pastor gets up, the church is working on a project, and says, got good news and bad news for you. And the good news is we got all the money we need for the project. And such is the way it goes with churches. The bad news is it's in your pocket. But we believe that God will provide the money, always has, and His timing is perfect. And we would hope to be able to start building when weather permits next year, having the funds to do that. So that's why phase 1 is the grade work. And when we found out that we could go ahead and do that, that's why we submitted a proposal and an application to get a conditional use permit to do the grading, have that done, and then continue to work. And hopefully by the end of next year, we have a building and facility that's completely meets the city standard and ready to go.
You just answered my second question.
I got just kind of off the. I know God will provide, right? Because that's what we believe. But how long did it take to get the funds necessary to do what you're doing now?
Well, the church is 9 years old, and I think we purchased the land 3 or 4 years ago. And with COVID and things like that, basically there's been very little promotion. And we did look at borrowing money. We have a man, one of our elders, really was earnest about that. I would prefer not to go in debt. And so there has been no earnest fundraising, I think, to respond to your question. And of course, people don't get excited about dirt. That's the bottom line. Dirt doesn't excite people, but once they have dirt down and they begin to see the structure, they get excited. And and people give the money. But I have no guarantee, have no plan, and it's a fair question. I understand it.
So, I mean, potentially you could look at 9 years to get your land, 9 years to build your building.
Well, we weren't
Kinda, I mean,
looking at land until 3 or 4 years ago, and then that came up, and that's when we purchased that land. And that's without any really campaigning or pushing or trying to raise funds to either buy the land or build a building. But now things are different.
just curious.
Mr. Roberts.
So let me see if I understand you correctly. You believe that if somebody starts seeing some progress there, grading and lot preparation, that's going to help your promotion and your fundraising towards the next phase?
The short answer is yes. And then in addition to that, Commissioner, would be the fact that now we are campaigning for the building of the building and believe the time is better and right for us.
Do you believe it would be a detriment to your fundraising if you get started on it and can't aggressively fundraise and it sits there in that same state for a year or two?
Well, I'm anxious, and I can be impatient. I'd like to see it done. And will it be a detriment? This is what I know, and I know that God provides money when He's ready. And I've seen it in this town, and not far from here, provide a tremendous amount of money. And so we'll trust that He does that. But I know what you're saying, and I understand that.
Do you think,
God's not a businessman. We don't look at it as a business. We don't run the church as a business. I know some do. And so we believe the time is right, and we'd like to approach this in 3 phases, and I do believe that once you get the dirt moving and they begin to see the structure and a lot of the pieces have come together with regard to some of the best, architect, the builder, the grader, other tradesmen are ready to come in there, and we consider that a blessing and an indication that the timing is good. But there's no guarantee.
yeah, we have seen projects in the city that have been started and then have languished
Sure.
time. And I think the perception for us is that puts kind of a negative connotation on the city for anybody who's visiting. They see it, or even for residents, they look at a project that's been started, and then everybody says, well, what's going on? What's going on? How come it's not going anywhere?
Right.
So we're kind of hesitant to go forward with a first phase out of 4 without more certainty in the time frame that we'd be looking at.
Right.
I think is where I feel about it. I don't know that anybody else does, but that's certainly my point of view on it. So I think if we had some more certainty, more optimism that everything is going to happen more quickly, I think we would be more inclined to allow that first phase to operate and then hope that the next phase and the third phase and the fourth phase will come together fairly quickly. Because I just don't think that we as a city, we've seen certain projects in town that have taken a long time. And there's even been times that we've had to force the hand of those people saying, you know what, if you don't get this moving forward at this point, then we're going to withdraw everything that's been done so far and you're going to have to tear it down. We don't want to be in that situation. We don't want to be a city that is being heavy-handed. So we would rather be a city that is helpful, and we would like to, especially with churches, we want to be overly helpful as much as we can be, because the churches are a benefit to the community. We just don't want to see them languish, and we don't want to see that particular corner is probably one of the most highly traveled corners in the whole city. So to have it with dust and raw soil sitting there for a long time and lose some of the trees that we already have is kind of a negative connotation in my eyes. So that would be a consideration, I think, for myself as a commission member. And I'm just hoping that we can somehow mitigate that.
I appreciate that. And just as a point of clarity, it's 3 phases. This is the first phase. and the funding is here and can be complete. And I appreciate, as a resident of Show Low for 30 years, and having seen some of those projects, I can appreciate what you're saying. And bluntly, there are no guarantees. And it certainly, but there are a whole lot of things that aren't guaranteed. Check your 401ks and some other things too. But anyway, I put it right out there. We'd like to get the grading going, and we trust, hope, and pray that we'd be able to have a building up and be able to occupy it before the end of next year.
Okay, thank you for your answers.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate your concern. I do.
Other questions for the applicant? Mr. Schneff?
So it looks like just pretty much the south side, or that, I guess, south side of that parcel is kind of what it is.
Yes.
The corner's not really money. How much dirt work is being done on there?
You need to ask Brandon Perkins.
I mean, are you,
So I mean, it's, I think I submitted basically Painted Skies, their engineering, and it shows the amount of dirt work. And so I'm a landscape guy, I'm a tree guy. I like a lot of landscape, a lot of grass, a lot of trees, and have a vision for that. And part of the way that we developed that property was to maximize the open area with no trees and to minimize removal of trees. And theoretically, the building itself calls for the removal of about 6 trees.
yeah, there's not that many trees in.
And then, of course, you leave it up to us, and we'll have a whole lot more trees there, and it'll be one of the prettiest places in town. But so to give you a picture, according to the engineering plans, there'll be a 4-foot retaining wall behind the property. So the building is set. There'll be a 20 or 30-foot patio behind what's the meeting place or the fellowship hall behind the sanctuary. And so you picture about 4 feet of dirt. And so that dirt will be removed and be raised the other side. I don't have the technical language, but so we anticipate that all the dirt that's there will be reused there. Won't have to bring any dirt in per se. Of course, that also depends on the soil work by Speedy.
Any other questions for the applicant, Commissioner Wilson?
I was just going to ask, so have you already checked out, I mean, that it's okay to put a church there? No.
Well, push come
they
to
do this
shove,
dirt work
push
and
come
then-
to shove legally, a church can go anywhere, even in a neighborhood. And I know there's places even down in our own state. So anyway, it's a good location. I know it was originally agriculture, then it was mobile home, legally. But on the other side of that, it's pretty hard to restrict a church from,
And-
even though I would want to put it in certain places.
And do you only have the money for phase 1, or do you have enough money to carry over to start?
We have the funds for phase 1, correct. And that's with virtually no real fundraising, just waiting to see. And as you all know well, COVID, and I'm not a prophet. I can't tell you what's going to happen, but things look good, and we as a church have been very blessed. We've got some great people that are motivated to see this happen.
Any other questions for the applicant? I have one as well, Mr. Hare. First off, I like the use on the piece of ground. I think it's a great use for that corner. Not too high, traffic impacts, and I think where you've situated the building is going to kind of preserve the natural area around that intersection, which is one of the busier ones in town. And so I appreciate your efforts on that. My question, and you may not know from your conversations with Perkins on what kind of time frame you're looking at for the construction of the grading work itself.
So Brandon, without any guarantee, he said they'd probably be able to do it October, November, but would have it finished this year. So granting a conditional use permit and the appeal process, and then we have a grading permit already submitted, and Perkins should have the final estimate to us, and their work will be done by the end of this week. We had requested, Lusk had asked to see if it would be ready by tonight, just to be able to have an idea, but And he did say without a guarantee that probably October, November, they'd be able to complete the work.
And this is probably going to be a question that transitions to Ms. Fechtelkotter here, but what, besides the dirt work, are you planning on doing anything else site-related when you're doing this grading work? Or is it only moving dirt?
I understand it, being a layman, basically a lot of some of the infrastructure, whatever they do in the dirt work, and I know when I met with Brandon, there's sewer, there's lines, there's this and that, and so, the drive will be in, everything will be ready to put a building on, compacted, soil test, and there's some kind of whatever has to be done in the dirt. I think a lot of that will be done.
This is a question for Ms. Fechtelkotter. Does it get paved? Is that part of the grading permit and the curb gutter, all of that go in, or is it just the dirt work?
It's just the dirt work.
Okay.
That is reviewed with the building permit.
Thank you.
My understanding from Brandon, when he's finished, it'll be ready for curb, the turning, all of that'll be, it'll be ready for that. So you could start, Lusk could start with the concrete or whatever is next, but I've exhausted my knowledge. I've gone past my knowledge.
Yeah, and I appreciate your answers. One follow-up for Ms. Fechtelkotter. If the engineering staff determine like, hey, we're gonna need some culverts or some type of, because I know there's those 3 large culverts that exit the property there. There's obviously some drainage issues. Would that potentially be a requirement of the city engineering review that some of the culverts and drainage structures have to be put in place with the grading phase? Because I don't want, even for you guys, I don't want you to go and move a bunch of dirt and then, monsoons hit next year and it all gets washed out. So
They do. They have to. It has to be approved by the planning and zoning. The engineering department. It is my understanding that they have submitted the grading and drainage plan as well to the engineer, and they're currently reviewing it.
Right. Awesome, thank you.
Hydrology plan is complete, and as the city requires, the detention pond will be built first or pretty early.
Right. Sounds great, Commissioner Roberts.
So, let me see if I get this correctly. In order for them to put any kind of dust control measures in or curbing or anything that might help control the drainage or the erosion of that property, they have to submit the building plans first, because that part of the development is part of the building permit.
So they could do the part where they're making sure that they install the improvements that make sure that all the dirt doesn't go away. That's why we mentioned the SWPPP. Basically, it's how during construction you prevent your sediment from draining off and affecting other property owners, or running off into the street. So that is a requirement as part of this process.
So they will or will not be allowed to put curbing in
We will.
before they do the plans for the building permit.
They have submitted the paving plan.
Ooh. Sorry to keep you up here. And so they could, are you planning on doing the paving?
That's phase 2.
Phase 2, okay.
We're not planning to do any hard surface, hardscape, concrete until phase 2.
Right, yeah, and it's clear you guys are ahead of schedule on the.
Part of the requirement from staff was that there's not only the tree preservation plan, which was submitted by Painted Sky, but the hydrology report, and that also shows. And then part of the requirement is that part of the project is done up front to take care of, I guess, drainage.
Yeah, and I know staff does a good job, so I'm not worried about that. But I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding where we're at on this project. So are there any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Commissioner Wilson.
I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this, because I anticipate there might be some audience questions on this. Is on this plot map, there is the the lot in which the church wants, are these other lots also available for someone else to purchase if they wanted? And if they did that, would they then be allowed to put mobile homes on this? The same with the plot in which the church has, if they were not to go through with this project, then mobile homes could be put all across this.
That is correct. Each lot is privately owned, so if they were to sell it, I want to say at least the next two are vacant. They could potentially put a manufactured home on each one of those. As far as a manufactured home park or something like that, that would require a conditional use permit.
Any other questions before I move to the public? Commissioner Roberts.
Do we anticipate that development of this property as a church will impact the park directly south of it negatively in any way?
All right, I'll move into the public comment portion. If there's anyone from the public who'd like to make a comment on this agenda item, you can come forward and do so at this time. And just state your name and address for the record slowly for.
You. Renee Isaacs, 201 West Whipple Street. So we're to the, I guess we'd be to the west of the property. First of all, love Steve and his crew. Have no problem with people doing what they want to on their own land. However, it seems very premature to be grading the land without the conditional use permit being in place, so that the community that is living in that area and traveling that road, and I respectfully disagree that that road is not a problem or that would not be affected. You know, there's lighting and things like that that need to be considered. The entire neighborhood needs to be considered, and so our feeling would be that I'm not necessarily opposed to the church, but I do think that the planning phase needs to be a little more thought out, and so that people can see what is being proposed there and could have their community input for that, and the opportunity to see, you know, what's going to be there and how that's going to affect people that actually live in that area. So generally not opposed, but I think it's premature to allow the grading and to do those things without having those details. Thank you.
My name is Dina Webster. I live at 180 Creekwood Lane in Sierra Pines. I live on the south side of the meadow. My property backs onto the meadow, so I'm definitely concerned with the meadow. And I mainly came to see what in the heck the public notice meant about grading without building, because that to me was very confusing. I also have a concern about the grading being done without for sure the permits being issued for the rest of it. I have nothing against the church building there. I do understand they can do whatever they want with their lot. And can anyone tell me what how much of that acreage, 34,000 square feet for a parking lot is? Now, is that the whole flat area up to your property line?
We can actually, we have an elevation. Also have a footprint, shows the building. Of it. Oh, there it is right there.
Is that it there? Okay, so where's the, okay. So is that Whipple over there on, so the entire thing's gonna be down at the lower part of the hill? The
Correct.
entire property? Okay, right on the meadow. I am a little concerned about the impact with the meadow because I've got thousands of game camera views of animals in that meadow over the last 6 years that we've lived there. And anything that's going to just totally take that away from the elk and the deer and the hare and and the raccoons, coyotes, and everything else that use that meadow concerns me. But grading ahead of time when we're not even sure the whole thing's going to be able to get done concerns me. That's my main concern right now. Okay? Because I don't want to wash down to my house.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Ms. Fetchcutter, is there anything you wanted to touch on based on those comments?
Sure. The reason that there is a conditional use permit without a grading permit, there's a very recognizable hill that a large retailer had come in probably 30 years ago and began to basically, grade and remove all the trees from that site. This requirement was put in code to kind of prevent stuff like that. The council and staff at the time felt that it was, in light of that particular incident, that it was appropriate to, give the public a chance to be notified when things like this are going to happen. So.
Sorry, Katie, you mean the reason the CUP grading requirement is because without a building permit?
And Mr. Hare, if you wanted to come back up and respond to any of those comments, you could do so at this time. And if you could speak into the microphone, that would be great.
So, to the comment, and to Renee, there is a footprint, and Lusk has completely done the building, and basically we know what we want to build, how it's going to be built, what's going to be on the outside. So that's complete, including the elevation. And so that part is far out there. And, once we have the funds, and I know Lusk is ready to move on that already. Of course, I love the animals, and I appreciate those animals killing the trees in my yard over the 25 years I've lived there, and the raccoons and everything in the backyard. And if there's anything that I'm very much in favor of, and that's preserving our resident herd. And, might add, before the city put the street in there, I walked every single morning up what is now Central and Whipple and through those mountains, and I love it. But the road came through and things keep developing, and I think the city's done a good job at preserving that. But, for us, we certainly want to not adversely impact that, and I can pretty well guarantee you that when the church is finished, it'll have a plethora of trees and landscaping, in that area. There'll be trees down there where there are no trees now, just so Renee and Travis have some nice things to, look down on, some colorful trees. But we want it to blend in. And I'm not sure if there was another question in that. I know the elevation might be a concern. You can see that, the footprint you saw on the screen. Minimal impact on removing trees. And I know the land, it was an eyesore, and why the city put that in, and I understand that and support it, that's for sure. Is there any other comment, Chairman, that I might have forgotten?
I'm good if you're good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and a motion. Sounded like there were some differing opinions on this one, so if anybody has any thoughts, now is the time.
I'll be happy.
Commissioner Roberts.
I'll start off with some comments. While I am very optimistic with Pastor Hare being very well known in town, and I believe that he will be able to ultimately raise the funds, my bigger concern is that we're kind of betting on the come. And I understand that we're putting faith in Heavenly Father, and that's fine. That's good. My concern is that there's such a terrifically long, in my eyes, period of time between the anticipation of when we do the grading and the anticipation of the starting of construction after the plans are submitted and the permits are approved, because that's not a short process. It takes a little bit of time, and work on everybody's part to do that. That being said, I think I would feel more comfortable if we were to revisit this in a few months rather than now. I realize that's the middle of winter. You know, we're in right now August, and 6 months from now will be February. But I think that given the uncertainty of everything in the world as a whole, but in particular the economy in the area, granted, it's been very, very good since COVID. COVID hit everybody, not just us, it hit the whole world. But I believe there's enough uncertainty that I would feel more comfortable. We have nothing against the church putting that. The plans look good. The plat layout and the proposed drawings of the locations and all of that, I believe that there's sufficient park remaining on there that the elk will still be able to visit that area without any impediment. Most of the elk I've seen have been further down Whipple and crossing over into the Sierra Pines area. But that said, I still have a problem with that grading starting and being fallow for a year. I would like to see that be a shorter period of time. I'm concerned about the possible ramifications. And once the grading started, it's kind of hard to undo it. It's not like we can say, okay, you built a building and it didn't get finished, so tear it down. If we do grading, it's done, and it's really hard to restore that. So I would feel more comfortable if we were to revisit this about 4 months from now, 4 to 6 months from now. But that's my personal opinion. And I don't know if any of the other commissioners feel that way, but that's my personal opinion.
Thank you, Commissioner Roberts. I believe the attorney, Ms. Atencio, has a comment at this point.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to remind the commission that there are standards of review for the conditional use permit. It's in your packet on page 7. So there are bases for denial, and it needs to fall within those bases. As well, I'm sorry, I apologize. And as was pointed out, if a conditional use permit is not approved, if it is denied per city code, it's a year before they can reapply for a conditional use.
And
So if it's denied, they can't come back in 3 to 4 months.
I apologize. I was previously aware of that on a previous case, and I'd forgotten that.
And if there is a desire to deny it, you need to be able to state why we're denying it. That falls within that standard of review.
Thank you, Ms. Atencio. Any other comments from the commission? I have one comment. I do share some concerns with Commissioner Roberts about, something getting started and not getting finished. That is something I, care about for this community, and it is, a very visible corner of town. As I'm looking at this, and this is going to be a question for Ms. Fettelkotter, what are the landscaping requirements approximately for the final building? Like when they submit the building plans, I assume there's going to be some type of landscaping requirements per city code. What does that generally look like? If you can give me a overview.
Absolutely. It's the lineal frontage of the developed area where they would be building times or minus the driveway area entrance times 10. So that would be the required area that they landscape. 30% of that has to be a vegetative ground cover, which we interpret as sod or artificial turf. They must provide 1 tree per 200 square feet of landscape area and 1 bush or shrub per 150 square feet of landscape area.
And generally speaking, that landscape, those requirements would be placed along Central. So, but essentially predominantly between the parking lot and Central.
That is correct.
And so I would be interested in potentially adding a condition where the landscaping requirements, or I'm pretty interested in other people's thoughts, that the landscaping requirements be accomplished with this grading permit. I don't know if we can do that because there's not a building permit, and how exactly, because there's not, if we don't know exactly how many square feet they're developing, we're a little ahead of schedule because they gave us a plan. They wouldn't necessarily have needed to provide this detail of a plan. And so I don't want to overstep necessarily, but I do want to be thoughtful about trying to spruce up the area a little bit, given the potential that it will stay partially undeveloped for some time. So I'd be curious on other commissioners' thoughts on that and staff's thoughts on what we can require as far as landscaping. I think we have a lot of leeway with conditional use permits.
You can add lots of conditions, but it's also got to be functional. If you're going to be adding bushes and trees in an active construction zone, is that going to impede future construction? So I don't know that they're going to necessarily know in advance what their landscaping, where they're going to put a tree or a shrub that's not going to end up getting pulled out when they actually start construction. So, you can add lots of conditions or be creative with conditions, but ideally they're realistic with moving forward.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the commission have any thoughts on that potential addition and how that might look?
Could we have them add the trees ahead of time there just to the west of Central where it's kind of blocking that grading so it's not so much of an eyesore for a year plus? Is that where you're anticipating them putting those trees?
That would be my preference of where they would go. Not necessarily by the entrance there, south of the entrance, or I guess.
Because if the construction is happening on the building, which is far enough over, where the entrance into the parking lot's going to be, could you just add trees except for where the entrance is going to be, to the north and south of the entrance and still block, some of that view there?
Yeah, that would be I would like to see that there, and I don't think that would impact their construction too much, especially if they're doing that as the final part of the grading work. If they've done all the grading work, it doesn't look like there'll be too much between that parking lot and Central, other than they'll have to get the concrete trucks in there through the entrance to pour the curb and lay the asphalt and stuff. So,
Can we ask the applicant to address that possibility?
yes. Mayor, if you'd be willing to come back up.
You warm my heart. I've already been looking at trees, and if it's up to me, I'd have a couple of them planted right now. No, I love the idea, and I love the condition, and, we've already discussed at length recently, because of the prevailing southern wind, along the parameter between our property, the church's property and Barber's, and then even the church's property in the future park, and then along Whipple. But no, I love the idea, and I can pretty much assure you there'll be a lot more trees, shrubs, and ground cover than required at the minimum. But I think it's reasonable, and I'd be very happy to see us do that. I'd have to talk to our elders, but I'm sure it's a slam dunk. Yeah, makes sense. You want to have any preferences for trees?
Big ones.
Consistent with the area.
Yep, absolutely. I've got my favorites: deciduous, non-deciduous, conifers, and colorful leaves, and give you a list of the popular ones. And I would have planted a couple this week if But yeah, we'd like to do that. I think that's reasonable.
Awesome. Thank you. Any further discussion or a motion? Commissioner Wilson?
Well, I was just going to say, as long as this conditional use permit meets the standards for reviewing the conditions of this, then we really have no choice other than we can add additional conditions, but we really have no choice on approving it, right? If it meets the standards. Am I correct?
Technically, you are.
All right, I just wanted to clarify that.
Anyone like to make a motion with that additional condition? I would be interested in hearing. Commissioner Roberts.
I am with the additional condition, if we can add that on, and taking into account that really, since this does meet all of the legal definitions of what the applicant can do on that property, I go ahead, I am willing to move that we approve a conditional, I move to approve the conditional use permit for 602-04-262 submitted by Maranatha Bible Church to allow for grading without a building permit at 900 South Central Avenue, that being APN 210-30013, subject to the additional condition that we put on and subject to staff recommendations.
I think you'll need to state out what the additional condition.
The additional condition is that they will plant some trees along Central there to try to mitigate the visibility from Central of the effects of the grading.
Are we specific to trees only, or are we using brush? Is brush? I need it to be very specific, please.
Can I jump in his motion, like, to clarify, or am I not allowed to? I know it's,
I think you're fine with clarifying Commissioner Roberts' motion as to the addition.
so are you saying that they would be subject to city code requirements for landscaping requirements for a facility of this type and of this size?
The city code.
Compliant with city code.
And with staff recommendations on what the long-term plans should contain. You know, in other words, I'm trying to say this in an easy way, but the additional condition should say additional landscaping in anticipation of what the long-term landscaping plan would look like,
Based on the submitted site plan.
based on the submitted site plans.
If I may just interject, I think that is kind of vague and it might be difficult to interpret down the road. So I would just suggest maybe more specifics to be able to actually meet compliance.
Again,
Sorry.
no, that's fine. So the additional condition should include planting area appropriate trees. Actually, I should say, let me rephrase this, Ashley, sorry. Planting trees consistent with the area to mitigate visibility impact from the grading process. That be sufficient?
So I reiterate my question from earlier. City code calls shrubs and trees. They're two different identified parts.
Okay.
Are we including shrubs and vegetation within this condition, or are we specifically identifying trees? And are we, sorry, and it was earlier mentioned that they wanted it on the north and south sides of the entrance, I believe it was, of the entrances, the north and southern sides of the entrances. Is that only where we want it, or?
I withdraw my motion, and I'm going to let Commissioner Carlo.
Sorry, Commissioner Roberts, I'm really sorry.
Would anybody else like to make a motion? I move to approve CUP 602-04-262 submitted by Maranatha Bible Church to allow for grading without a building permit at 900 South Central Avenue, that being APN 210-30-013, subject to staff recommendations and an additional recommendation that landscaping as required per city code for landscaping per city code based on the submitted site plan be required to be installed with this grading work on the north and south sides of the proposed entrance location off of South Central Avenue. Is that specific enough?
Or, yeah, north and south sides. I'm sorry, one more time.
North and south sides of the proposed entrance to the facility. Yeah, is that all you need? I think that's good.
We good? Is that?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
I have a motion.
Commissioner Barber.
Do I have a
I
second?
second it.
I have a second by Commissioner Roberts. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And that passes unanimous.
As with any conditional use permit, there's a 7-day appeal period. If no appeal is received within 7 days with the city clerk's office, this CUP will become effective.
Thank you, Ms. Spector-Cutter. The next item on the agenda is call to the public. If there's any citizen desiring to speak on a matter within the jurisdiction of the Planning and Zoning Commission that is not on the agenda this evening, you may do so at this time. Seeing none, I will move on to item 7, approval of minutes. And I will also make the motion on the approval of the minutes. I move to approve the minutes from the Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting of July 25th, 2023, subject to changing the motions as listed. Under item A, adding Commissioner Hatch as a commissioner voting in favor. And item B, adding Commissioner Wilson as a commissioner voting in favor. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Wilson. All those in favor of approving the minutes, subject to the changes I mentioned? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Gentry, was that good to go for you? Okay, that passes unanimously. All right, moving on to item 8, summary of current events, and we will begin with Commissioner Wilson.
I just want to remind everybody about Meals on Wheels. They're down at our Turn of the Card Senior Center. They work out of that. They are donation-based, and they have some city funding and stuff, but they're always looking for donations of food and volunteers to help. And so if you're interested in serving the community, Meals on Wheels is a good place to go.
I'll just remind everyone with school starting back up, a lot of really cool sporting events coming up, football, cross country, volleyball, soccer, things like that. So if you get a chance to get out there and support the youth, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Another great day in Shello.
That's hard to follow every week. But it's true. Another great day in Shelby.
I think I'll just add thanks to staff for getting these packets and stuff put together and helping us be prepared for these. The last few have been, there's been a lot of interest in them, and so thank you to all the work that you guys put into this, and Katie for taking a little extra duty these past few weeks. I know we on the commission really appreciate that, and I'll turn it over to you.
I just wanted to say that Vice Chairman Lewis has resigned, and we thank him for his service to the commission.
Did he be posted?
I believe that they will be posting either in late September or early October. You can check our website or come into City Hall for an application, but we post that on our city website.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Fechtelkotter. And seeing no other items on the agenda, I will adjourn us for this evening.